Hey guys, Mike here. We're going to do another maintenance video for you. We're going to show you how to adjust your rear cassette, how to adjust the guide screws, how to adjust the cable tension, because if you've had any problems with gears slipping, jumping, clicking, not just performing nice and smooth, then you're going to have a problem with the setup on your cassette and your derailleur. So you need to adjust all that. You need to adjust the derailleur so that it all functions perfectly and gives you all correct gear changes from 1 to 12. So we've got the gears selected to the lowest gear, first gear right up on the biggest one. Okay, so when we're doing the adjustment of the B screw, is the measurement top of the teeth of the jockey wheel and the bottom of the teeth of the biggest sprocket, first gear. The B screw is so important and it must be adjusted while the rider is on the bike. We do what I do, I'll put the jockey wheel close to the top sprocket so the teeth are almost touching, because when you jump on the bike then with your rider's weight, it'll give you around about 3 to 5 mil gap or a little bit more, and really you just want it so it's missing, you don't want the teeth clashing. So this one has got way too much gap. I don't even have a rider on the bike, just showing the difference at the moment. But I'm going to adjust that B screw so it's just shy of the sprocket teeth. Okay, here we go. So we're bringing it up, winding it out, and there we go. Just shy. No teeth clashing. When we stand on the bike and get on the bike ourselves, that gap will open up a little bit further again. Let's try the highest gears, see what the gap's like. Okay, so in the higher gears, same thing. So you can see the cassette, the sprockets, and the jockey wheel, and that's with no person on the bike. There's still no clashing of teeth, but just off. So we've got clearance. Now that keeps the jockey wheel so close to the cassette that it stops the skip. If that B screw is wound out too far, there'll be more gap, and it gives more ability for the chain to jump from sprocket to sprocket. So you want it up nice and tight to from the jockey wheel to the sprockets. Work on your first gear, that's the main one you work on, and it should be right for all the others, but just make sure that you've got just clearance, and then when you get on the bike there'll just be a few mil more. Okay, so we're going to work on the derailleur now, the adjustment, the chain adjustment. Okay, so we need to move the gears to the smallest sprocket, the highest gear. This screw here we're going to loosen off. That's the cable adjuster. You need to make sure that it's got some slack in it. Make sure at your lever end you've got all the adjustment taken out of it. Okay, so we turn it clockwise to turn all the adjustment back on the cable, so the cable is as loose as it can be clockwise. Highest gear, smallest sprocket, has just got no tension on it. And then when you get there, just do up that screw to lock off that cable again. Once you've got just enough, just the slack taken out of that cable, can't be too firm, otherwise it'll already be pulling the derailleur. So make sure it's just got some slack, and then tighten off your lock screw. And then you've got your cable adjusted. Next we can work on the end stop screws. Now they move the derailleur from side to side, the full extent of the derailleur. They're the limit screws that stop it from ratcheting right off your sprocket. I'll just show you those. So the main thing is when you're adjusting your stop limit screws, this inner screw is adjusting how far the derailleur comes across, and we want it lined up, the jockey wheel lined up exactly above the smallest sprocket. When we ratchet right up to the first gear, the biggest sprocket, we use this outer limit screw. Once you've got the gear selector up onto your largest sprocket, then you want to adjust that other outer limit screw. You want to adjust the jockey wheel so it's perfectly above the center of that large sprocket, and you don't want it running the chain off the sprocket. So if you keep changing down and then back up, down, back up, if it rolls off, then you need to adjust it so it doesn't roll off the sprocket. But if it's jockey wheel's directly above that sprocket, that's where you want it, and that's why you adjust that screw. And same with down on the smaller sprocket, have them both so they stop the derailleur at exactly the extent of the two sprockets, the largest and the smallest. Now we can go back to the highest gear again. Okay, so we've got it back onto 12th gear, and now we need to do some fine adjustment of the cassette with the cable adjuster now. So we just need to take up what little bit of slack might be there in the cable, and that will give our final adjustment of the gears, and the gear selector takes care of all the rest. It's set up for 12 speed, so every click gives it exactly the right distance that it should be jumping from one sprocket to the next. So as long as your cable adjustment is correct and you've got your end stop screws adjusted correctly, then you're going to have good gear change. So let's just go in and we just gradually adjust the cable tension so that it selects the next gear up, and we just make sure that the derailleur jockey wheel is in line with each gear as we go, and if it is, then we've got the tension just right on the cable adjuster. And then as you go from there, after the next few days and weeks of riding, you'll find you probably have to just adjust the cable a little bit up on your hand adjuster just to give it a little bit of tension or a little bit of release, and that's just something you have to do as you're riding normally. You have to get good at evaluating whether it's a little bit loose, a little bit tight, and when you figure that out, then you can just give it a little tweak. But you do have to adjust these every couple of weeks of riding if you're riding every day. Second gear, right up on the first gear, selecting it, not dropping off the sprocket. So it just needed about a full turn of cable tension just up on the gear selector. Now it's going to release through all the gears. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Just check it on 6th gear, still perfectly over the sprocket, the jockey wheel that is. Top gear, gear 12, not railing off the cassette. So on every gear, the jockey wheel is perfectly centered over the top of each corresponding gear. And that means that the cable tension is now adjusted correctly, just about one turn, just to give it a little bit of tension back up on the cable. And then over the next few days, as we ride, just make sure that the cable hasn't got a little bit more slack come into it. And if it does, just give it another half turn on the selector just to wind a little bit more tension back onto it. And then maybe just every couple of weeks, you might just have to tweak that. So there's the derailleur setup, the adjustments, the end stop adjustments, the B-screw adjustment, which is highly critical. So once you've got all those main adjustments done, your outer and inner limits, your cable is adjusted, you've taken up the slack and you've adjusted it so that it's changing from 12th to 11th gear and backwards, and it's sitting the jockey wheel exactly above each of those gears, then you've got everything set up just right, and you should have gear selection correcting on every gear just nicely. And then when you get out riding and when you're powering on a hill, it's not going to slip on you. You've checked that the jockey wheel's sitting over each sprocket on every gear. Good selection for every gear. 1 to 12, and you'll have great riding from here on. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I hope you really learned something out of it today. If you did, please subscribe and that'll help me get more videos out for you. I really pray that God blesses you and keeps you safe when you're out there on the trails. And just remember one thing, ride hard.